Hello, my name is Jessica Hill, and I am the president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Mu Kappa Omega Chapter in Missouri City, Texas. In 2019, we began the journey of the Legacy Career Path. The Legacy Career Path is one where you lead in excellence while growing and aspiring and investing in you. We are in a moment today in society where there are uncertainties in our day-to-day lives, where we don't feel as if we have confidence in our economy or even in our personal financial foundation. Career readiness empowers us to build a foundation where you can take full advantage of new opportunities for advancement and increased wealth. The first step in the process is to start with a good conversation centering around your career and what tools you need to advance. The women of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Mu Kappa Omega Chapter, are looking forward to having this conversation with you. Thank you for your time and welcome to Career Conversations. You will now hear from our first Vice President, Venice Berry.
My name is Venice Berry, and I serve the Missouri City chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated as its first Vice President, Chairman of Programming. One of the programs that our international office has tasked us with is helping our people build economic legacy. Well, you want to know what economic legacy is? Well, research shows that African Americans lag in asset accumulation, managing debt effectively, or saving at a meaningful level. But with doing those things, what do you need? A career or a job, some type of resource that would provide you that extra income or the income to do that, to provide the necessary income that could leave a tangible wealth for your children or grandchildren. And so with that being said, we have Mr. Ray Jackson joining us today, and we'd like to welcome you to our Career Conversations program.
Thank you, Soror Venice, for that wonderful welcome for our program here today. We are so excited to have our guest with us, Mr. Ray Jackson. But before we let him loose to give us some great advice on how we can advance in our careers, I want to just tell you a little bit about Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson is a career development coach whose career success didn't come naturally for him. He was passed over for promotion several times, causing him to check out and hit a low point in his career. But fast forward a few years and he reinvented himself and had a job change. He actually was promoted twice in 3.5 years into roles that were explicitly created for him. His last position was a leadership role where he actually paid it forward to another employee that was on the verge of quitting the organization. And they partnered together to create her ideal job role, establish her brand, and pitch the idea for promotion to senior leadership. As a result, her position was approved. So you see, Mr. Jackson has a little bit of magic in his HR approach. Mr. Jackson has learned from this experience in his overall career journey to build a career consulting businesses, focusing on helping overlooked professionals break through career obstacles and build an irresistible professional brand and position themselves for career advancement. So we are so excited to speak to Mr. Jackson and gather some of his wisdom. Thank you again, Mr. Ray Jackson, for joining us today. We're so excited to speak with you and learn more about how we can advance in our careers. Our topic is how employees have to rethink their marketing and brand strategy to attract employment. So I want to pepper you with this first question. How do you know when it's right to change jobs or careers?
So I think that's a great question. So what comes to mind, there's really several prompts that I think all of us need to be aware of. So I think one of the main ones is kind of looking at our happiness. So if we are currently unhappy within our role or within the organization, that's probably a good prompt to listen to and to pay attention to, so that way we can start preparing ourselves to make that next move, whether it's, with a totally different organization or maybe moving around to a different department. It just depends on the nature of the situation. Another prompt to be aware of is maybe we're just bored. maybe we got to that point in our career where everything comes so naturally and easily and we're no longer being challenged. So that will probably be another indicator as to whether or not, hey, it might be time for me to look for other opportunities that might be a little bit more challenging, and also that will enable me to develop my skills further. One last one that I really want to share is toxic work environments. That's probably like a huge red flag. So that's not just the prompt, it's a red flag, an indication that, hey, it's probably in my best interest that I look for employment elsewhere. And so with all of those, really the key thing to keep in mind is that we can't afford to ignore those prompts or those indicators, because eventually it'll start coming back on us where it could potentially stall us out in our career if we allow that to linger beyond where it should be. And I'm speaking from experience. I've had I had a job once where it became a toxic environment. So the team that I was originally on and that I was hired into, over time, those folks left the organization for other opportunities, and then the whole dynamics of the team began to change over time. And as it was happening, I really didn't realize that it was slowly becoming a toxic environment. But by the time I kind of got my bearings and I realized what was happening, I was enmeshed into this environment. And the bad thing, and the reason why I'm saying this and sharing this, because the reason why we don't want to wait too long, because we might get into the point where, our personal obligations, whether, you're managing a household or you're raising a family or you have bills and things of that nature. So we might get stuck because we might feel like, okay, I need this job because I got to pay my bills. I got to take care of my family. But by that point, if you are able to get out of that situation, everything is really tied, excuse me, into your emotions. So you may not be making the best proactive decision that you can possibly make, simply because we didn't really hone in on those prompts and those indicators as things were changing within that work environment. So key thing, like I said, is just to pay attention to those prompts. And if you start noticing it, that might be the best time to start, brushing off your skill set, maybe developing further in certain areas, and also looking out for better opportunities, whether it's within the organization, maybe a different department altogether, or perhaps looking outside of the organization.
That was fantastic advice. I think in this environment, especially in 2020 and 2021, there's been a lot of impetus on individuals to make changes, but sometimes fear gets in the way. So how, as our second question, how do you gain the confidence and lessen the fear of stepping outside of your comfort zone and making that change when you have that toxic environment, or it's just time for you to move on career-wise?
Absolutely. So that's probably my favorite question out of the questions that you'll ask this evening, because I can really relate to that as well. So the first thing, it's easier said than done, but take the first step. Okay. I don't care how intimidating it might be or how overwhelming that feeling might be. Hey, I'm going to take this risk. I'm going to step out there. But taking that initial step kind of enables you to get over that initial fear. Now, granted, it could be uncharted territory. It could be, a lot of uncertainty involved in the situation, but taking that first step is a big deal, because once you kind of put that toe out there and you realize, okay, my toe didn't get crushed, I didn't die. So, hey, maybe it's not as scary as I thought. Yes, there's a lot of unknowns, but taking that initial step kind of gets you over that hump. Now you can start building momentum towards your ultimate goal. The next thing that I really want to emphasize, and so I know for a lot of folks, we suffer, me included, from the imposter syndrome or just self-doubt, whatever you want to call it. Okay. So my take on that, and this is something that I haven't really heard too many people talk about, but my take on all of that is, first and foremost, all of us are businessmen or businesswomen. We're business people. Okay. So like, for example, I'm in learning and development, corporate training. So the way that I would identify myself is I am a businessman who happens to specialize in training and development. Or Monique is a businesswoman who happens to specialize in human resources. Okay. Those simple words. And the key thing here is words matter. So just reframing what you do. I mean, you could be the entry level person, maybe you've only been there for a year, but just reframing what you do does a lot in building our confidence, because ultimately we all do work for organizations that are in the business of making money, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in education, whether it's in oil and gas. It doesn't really matter what the industry is. You're a business first, and then you have your specialties. Like I said, whether it's human resources, it could be finance or what have you. By starting out like that, then it's like, okay, I don't feel as inadequate as I thought I did, because guess what? I'm a businessman or I'm a businesswoman first and foremost. And my area of expertise happens to be in, HR or finance or supply chain or whatever it might be. That thought in itself is so empowering, because at the end of the day, we should be able to identify how our role and what we contribute aligns to the overall scope of the organization. In this case, it's a business. If you're able to articulate that, the facts don't lie. So you've been able to do this, this, and this as a human resource professional or as a finance professional or what have you. So now when you start looking for those other opportunities, you can say, hey, I've noticed this about your business. Okay, these are some areas that I've noticed that you're having or you're experiencing some challenges. And based on my experience, these are some of the things that I would recommend in improving your, your situation. So you kind of take out all the ickiness in trying to sell ourselves, and you're really speaking on a level of business partner to business partner. Does that make sense?
No, that makes fantastic sense. And speaking of getting to that point where you feel comfortable selling yourself. So let's say you've gotten to that point, you've gotten over your fear, and you're ready to step out there, put your toe in the water per se, but there's so many applicants, there's so much competition. How do you stand out from your contemporaries? How do you make sure your resume gets to the top of the pile and doesn't get discarded or ignored?
Absolutely. So this is like the cherry on top. Okay. So it's simple answer, simply be you. Okay. And so I know that's easier said than done, because a lot of us, especially being people of color, it's almost like we have to put on a mask. In the past, it's always felt like, hey, I got to put on my work face, or I got to leave my personality and who I am out in the car, and then I show up whatever way that they want me to show up. But now I think just seeing what's transpired over the last 1.5 to 2 years, or what's been growing over the last, 4 to 5, or even, a decade's time's worth. But we've seen society get to the point where so many different groups are talking about, hey, I want to be able to bring my complete self to work every day. Okay. Well, the same thing holds true as we're looking for other opportunities. So when you start thinking about competing in the marketplace against other candidates, the thing that makes you you is the fact that you have a unique set of skills, you have a unique experience that's just about you. And so the more that we can show forth that uniqueness, that's what differentiates us. So for example, if you have let's just say let's say 50 candidates for a specific role. Let's say it's an accountant or accounting role. Okay, so you're up against 50 candidates. So how in the world can I differentiate myself? And so let's say, for example, I'll just use my, even though I'm not in accounting, but let's just use my background. Okay, so I was denied, and I know you said this at the beginning of the of this video segment, but I was denied the opportunity to get promoted at 2 different companies, in my own department. 2 different companies, 2 different organizations completely. I didn't get that opportunity. I applied, it was within my own department, and so on and so forth. But then subsequently, I ended up going to an organization where I was promoted twice into roles that did not exist. That story is so different. Nobody's sharing that if I was going up against 100 candidates, 1,000 candidates, I can guarantee you nobody else is saying that. If they had the similar experience, they're not sharing that publicly because they're ashamed of the fact that they didn't get, those first 2 promotions. The reason why I'm so passionate about this, because I actually just had an interview yesterday. Okay, I'm going from one organization to another organization. And I did my homework on the interviewer. I knew she was one of these people that that looks for folks that are transparent and being authentic. So I knew that. So I led off my interview. She asked me, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Just kind of walk me through your work history. I started off with the fact that I was denied promotion opportunities at 2 different roles. And, later on I got promoted and so on and so forth. And so with that being said, I actually, about 2 or 3 hours after my interview, they said, Mr. Jackson, we're excited to say that you're going to be moving along in our process, and we'll be having secondary interviews starting next week. And I was excited. I was extremely happy. But if this was like 2 or 3 years ago, I guarantee you I would not have been comfortable sharing my complete self during that interview, because you're like, okay, so why are you going to make yourself vulnerable during this time in which you're trying to sell yourself? But the fact is that what we consider, or what the world considers our weaknesses, I say lead off with that, especially if you've been able to overcome those weaknesses, because that's your story and nobody else can replicate your story. It could be similar to yours, but it's not yours exactly the way that it happened in your life. And that's what makes you different than all the other candidates. And so if you're not completely comfortable with your story, as far as showing up each day as your complete self, my encouragement would be start putting yourself out there more often, just so that way you can get more comfortable, whether it's posting a little bit more on social media, or at least posting at all on social media, sharing your story, because it's twofold. And I'll end with this, it's twofold. So not only are you growing and developing and learning to share more of who you are, but guess what? Somebody else is going to see that post. It's going to be encouraging as well as inspiring to someone that might be in the similar situation as yourself, but they're too afraid to take that initial step, simply because they're afraid to show up each day, and also on the interview, or at least out in the marketplace as their true selves. And so by you sharing your story, it empowers someone else to kind of show up, and it almost has like that ripple effect amongst your peer group and your network. So that would be my word of encouragement. And, best of luck. And just remember, the world will be neglected as far as not experiencing the value that you bring to the table if you fail to show up each day and sharing that value. It's almost like you're robbing other people of the opportunity to grow from your experience and from your expertise. So just let it go and just take that risk. And I promise you, someone that can speak on this stuff firsthand, once you do, it's extremely liberating, because it's like, hey, what you see is what you get. If you like me, you like me. If you don't, so be it. I'm going to continue to move forward, and I'm going to continue to try to inspire and help others. And that's all.
Wow, that was some awesome advice. I hope everyone had their pens and papers together so they could get everything down. Thank you so much, Mr. Jackson, for sharing with us your wisdom. I hope that inspired someone to take that leap of faith and make that change. Wow, such amazing advice from Mr. Ray Jackson. Let's keep that train rolling as we speak to our next guest, Mr. Chris Murray. Chris Murray is an executive HR leader with over 21 years of human resources experience across various industries, including biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, and petroleum, for examples. He is the owner of a Higher Success Career Consulting, a boutique firm focused on helping job seekers master the fine art of landing a job through resume development and interview preparation services. Chris is also the owner of Vivid HR Consulting, which partners with businesses to help build and enhance HR in their organizations. Since graduating with a bachelor's degree in business management, Chris has personally interviewed and overseen the hiring of over 1,000 job seekers from his perch in HR. He has a passion to help job seekers and companies succeed. He trains, recruits, and hires HR professionals, staffing agents to source, recruit, and onboard talent effectively. Chris is currently the head of HR at a multinational biotech pharmaceuticals company based in Austin. Chris, we're so excited to have you, and welcome. And now I'll toss it over to Monique to ask our dying questions about how we can succeed career-wise.
Thank you, Diana. And now we're going to speak with Chris Murray on how companies have had to rethink their marketing and brand strategy to attract employees. Chris, what would you say are some of the best practices for building a powerful employer brand?
Well, this is a hot topic for employers. We are in what we call right now a candidate market. That means that candidates are driving the conversation. Candidate offers are more lucrative. Candidates are being more discerning. And so employers have to really figure out how they can differentiate themselves. So a lot of us are thinking about the three C's. How do we get in front of the right candidate? How do we present the right content to them? And what's the right channel to meet them? So that is part of the broader strategy that we're undertaking to get in front of the right audiences today.
Perfect. Thank you. So, and along that line, too, in your experience, how have companies leveraged their employees as brand ambassadors?
That's another big topic because uh, many of us are talking about what is our employer value proposition or EVP. And so a lot of the leaders in the HR realm are getting in corners and rooms and trying to figure out how we get this message of our content, what makes us credible, what makes us special to the potential candidates that would join their companies. One way that they're able to do that is obviously through using the mouthpiece of their own employees. So the obvious thing is that you've seen an increase in the amount of employee referral bonuses that companies are offering. We're seeing these numbers continue to rise because ultimately it costs money to recruit, and employers are saying, well, it seems like a win-win to invest in our own employees. So this is one way. The other thing is how do we ultimately communicate these messages to audiences? And so there's the rise of social media as part of the strategy. There's a shift going on where employers are moving away from boring, old-fashioned job descriptions and starting to use job ads that kind of speak to your heart, that speak to your desires, that call out to you from an emotional perspective to attach you to the job. And hopefully by attaching people at an emotional level to the job, they stay longer. They're more engaged throughout the journey of being an employee, and ultimately maybe they're contributing at a higher level. So they're thinking about how they broadcast that message both internally and externally through social media, through employer referral bonus programs, through other incentives that employers are offering, reframing the job description. So these are also just ways that employers are thinking about how we do this better, how we get a better end result.
Great. Thank you. That's very informative. And so, along that same vein, now that these employers have gone through this rebranding strategy, have leveraged their employees as brand ambassadors, potentially brand champions, how will companies know when it's time to make a change to their brand strategy?
It's just happening organically right now because the competition for the talent is so high. So when you know that you are in a market where competition for the people that you want is stiff, you have to differentiate yourself. You have to make your product, your outreach better, faster, quicker, more relevant than all of your competition. And so we are in a place where employers are even like, let's use LinkedIn for example. We have stats that show about 94% of all recruiters use LinkedIn, and almost 50% of those recruiters use LinkedIn nearly exclusively. That's a statement about where job seekers ought to be. All right. So if job seekers want to get in front of employers, employers are on LinkedIn, we have to be there. We're seeing now that employers are using the insights from platforms like LinkedIn to know who to engage with as an audience. Did you know that recruiters can actually know that you are following a company on LinkedIn? So they can see that you're following our company, and that might represent a statement of engagement. We're also thinking about how we can keep relationships warm when there isn't an actual job available, but knowing that, hey, this is a position that comes open about once a quarter, about once or twice a year. I've got to be ready. So how do I massage my pipeline and keep that active relationship growing while there isn't a role? So you're seeing these talent communities pop up where employers are kind of opening a door and allowing you to have conversations and meet the recruiter and talk about yourself and have engaging discussions. We're also trying to figure out how we can give more insights about the people that we employ to make sure that ultimately we're making quality hiring decisions. So you're seeing more employees use psychoanalytical assessments to help them in the decision-making process. You're seeing the rise of video interviewing where they just send you some questions and they ask you to just interview over a video. And as impersonal as that seems, you get some serious insights about how people deliver, how they present. You're also seeing even more recruiters leveraging written screening questions to candidates so that we can even assess how you write and how you deliver content, especially at a high level when you're trying to sell. And then ultimately, you're you're also seeing a lot of companies use that little apply via LinkedIn button on their actual applicant systems
Mm.
that connects you with your social media like a LinkedIn and gives them a window into your social media personality or persona. For good or for bad, I'm going to recommend to all of you wonderful AKA sisters out there, use that sparingly. You don't want too many open windows to who you are, to your future employer. Certainly connect with them, engage with them on social media, but don't use that quick apply via LinkedIn button. It's just a step too far. And that's just coming from Chris, the HR guy.
Well, thank you, Chris. We truly appreciate you sharing your insight regarding companies' brand strategy with us today. It was extremely informative and insightful. Thanks again.
Thank you, Chris, for that dynamic dialogue. And now I'd like to send it over to our coaching corner with our very own soror, Monique Desant Crawford.
Welcome to the Coaches Corner, where we're going to discuss you exploring your search strategy. Tip number 1, your brand. Update your digital presence. Do you have a LinkedIn account? Is it informative and captivating? Read books, listen to podcasts, watch videos that will all assist you in your self-development. Tip number 2, your resume. 95% of large companies use resume tracking systems, and knowing how to outthink them will make an enormous difference. A critical mistake is made when applicants fail to fully review the job postings. Your resume should get specific in capturing your accomplishments. Talk facts, figures, and numbers. Tip number 3, your interview. An interviewer's first impression is made in less than 30 seconds. Do your pre-interview research on the company. What makes it special compared to its competitors in the marketplace? And finally, do not get discouraged. Finding your dream career is not easy. Come prepared and be ready. Thank you for joining us today for the Coaches Corner.
We hope you've enjoyed our career conversations. Thank you, sorors. Thank you, guest speakers, for your enlightenment. You all have a wonderful day and take care.